Hey, it's Courtney Barriger, your host of Environmental Style Now, the A to Z podcast on all that is sustainable fashion. Today, coming to you live from Valladolid, which is this cute little colonial town in Mexico. On this episode of ES Now, I have the pleasure to speak with DeAnna Batdorff, 25-year practitioner of Ayurveda and local legend in Sebastopol, California. She's here to tell us about the body and its connection to apparel. And she's also going to tell us a fascinating philosophy within ancient Ayurveda texts. Hello, I'm Courtney Barriger, and this is ES Now. Today, I'm with DeAnna Batdorff, founder of the DeAnna Center, that is now called DeAnna Essentials, based in Sebastopol, California. DeAnna has touched over 100,000 lives, teaching them the loving kindness that is Ayurveda, and she's here to share with us Samkhya philosophy, which explains why we are so out of balance as a world culture. Let's jump right in.
I was living in San Francisco, working in the HIV/AIDS community, and I was simultaneously feeling this need for people who might be contagious or something scary or even death. And I could just see the fear in everybody. And I just kind of didn't have a feeling of fear in it. And I was like, wait, this is wrong. We need to put on gloves. We need to take care of these people, And so I ventured off to become a massage therapist. And I moved to San Francisco. And that was from 18 and a half. And then I was there by the time I was 19. And simultaneously, I was like, how am I going to make money? And what am I doing? And I was led to become a cosmetologist when I was in high school. So I was in a vocational program. So not only was I a massage therapist by 19, but by the time I graduated high school, I already had my 1,600, hours of cosmetology beauty college. And that's what I did by morning, 6 a.m., junior, senior year of high school, 6 a.m., back by 2, take 2 classes in high school, and then, off to work to a hair salon I went. To learn everything. And that's where I really started with HIV and AIDS, because the person I worked for was struggling with that. And so that was the first person I was with when they passed away. And it was precious to be with somebody lying there, leaving their body. And I just felt like I was home or something. And I was comfortable, and I really wanted to make sure he had a good send-off. And it made me just realize, wow, and I worked with, in convalescent homes and senior centers as a child. So I also kind of was working around death. I'd show up and the person would be gone. And I'd be like, whoa, okay, they transcended. And so I was with him, and he left me an extremely important little note on top of a gift in his side drawer. And it said, choose health, not beauty. And it was this, whoa. And I just was like, I do have to pursue this health and find what is truly beauty, because that's what we used to talk about all the time. And it was just like, wow, what a precious gift to make sure that he was, steering me in the direction of caring for people, and oh my gosh, hair and makeup and beauty and all things that are that, they are precious gifts of medicine and just keeping us in daily discipline, and I think we forget that there's so much more routine around those things, and we could really grow from those routines. And we don't need to be separating the two. And that's really the truth for me now. It's not that I'm just choosing health and not beauty, but that's what the note says. But, Now it's like, what is beauty, and what is it to choose health? And then that takes me to my whole background of self-care. And then what led me to, I know I'm not really speaking to what led me to Ayurveda, but think about it. This is what led me to be able to even feel like I could go to a class like that. And what happened was, I had this client from India. I worked at a spa in San Francisco called Beauty Body Wellness. It was on 3rd Street, industrial land, and it overlooked all the skyline of San Francisco. It was fabulous. And I loved my time there. And I was giving this woman a massage, and she said, "Oh, you have such Indian hands. There's like India in you." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, I am so honored." I was obsessed with people from India and their clothing when I was a child. I mean, I just was like, "There's one of them again." And then my mom would be like, "Yes, and there's so many in our community." And it was just this really beautiful, like, the color, the fabric, the textures. I mean, just like, there's so much about it. And she said, "There's this amazing Ayurvedic doctor who is going to UCLA, and he has a house there, and he's teaching Ayurveda out of his house. And he's a Tibetan monk, and his name's Dr. Lobsang Rabgai. And he's now a professor at UCLA of psychology. And you should call him and get in on these classes." And I was 20, 21, right in that time frame. And I was just on fire, it was just like, I just was already seeing people, getting moved by aromatherapy and layering in haircuts. Oh my gosh, cutting of someone's aura. Think about that. You are literally trimming their aura into what it is. So, like when I've done haircuts, I'm always like, 3 words. Who do you want to be with this haircut? Give me 3 words. Because, everything's a health journey. Everything's fun and playful. And that's what I love about beauty. And then Ayurveda is so health and beauty. I mean, they're skin and tissue related. I mean, how much do I teach? The 7 tissues and the lymph, which is a lymph luster, and just keeping everything plump and juicy and tonified. And that's then the concept of health. That's how we know we're healthy. And then Ayurveda started really teaching me. Dr. Lobsang started really teaching just what is the value of touch and how could I use my hands. He was amazing at Marma Chikitsa, all the pressure points and the nadi meridians, and which are the nerve pathways. And I just really got into it. And he was a pulse master. So everything was about assessment, diagnostic, skin, face, tongue, pulse. Pulse is the big science. Everything's there. It's blood cell analysis. So it's very deep and very precious. And I just feel so lucky to have that. Like, I literally had a woman who, like, I was giving a massage to in a spa and she like changed my life. And I really wish I remember her name and could remember, conjure that, because man, I would just have so many times now sent her thank yous and stayed in contact. I know she lived in LA somewhere.
It's interesting when you talk about beauty too. It does actually, fashion and costume kind of play into that too. It's not as complete, it's something that you put on the body, but it's also a part of the beauty routine.
Yeah. And it's auric, and it's our senses, it's sensory, and there's just some really powerful, pieces there in sensory. And, no matter what direction you look at your health, you're always going to have to like look at the demonic negative side and make sure you don't tip on over, you know what I mean? And then you got to like be all, I'm going to get back over there, get me back on over into that, light and staying in the positive and like big picture. And you just have to like play the edge of judgment and envy and greed. Those are things that are literally involved in some levels of what I've seen in my experience, in some levels of beauty, and even my own self-worth, piece. And I think those things are real. And why not take a look at those? There's all kinds of things. Every single one of us have stuff about us that we don't like, There is not a single person in my, probably up to about, easy 250,000 intakes. There's not a single human who doesn't have these things that just like really get them. And then it has to be like, yeah, but what are all those cool things about you that allow you to, really be satisfied? And I think that's an important thing too. Beauty leans into pleasures and satisfaction. And like, I love those things, and wanting to be desired and touched and loved and seen. Like, we do not need to be hiding that. That is okay, as long as we are staying without expectations and not like, putting, certain, standards on it or getting too fixed. And then it just becomes like, yeah, I mean, shouldn't we all be kind of like flowing around in our truths and being seen and letting each person just be who they are? So there's that envy part that gets kind of weird, and greedy part that's just kind of like, and I want, I mean, I've certainly looked at somebody in a pair of pants before and been like, man, I want that ass. I'm sorry, but I have. I'm not going to deny that. I am a human and I am pleasure driven. And like all kinds of humans and genders. And, there's definitely been that time where I'm like, wow. And, I remember my early days of kind of like then making myself small. Immediately, I'm worth nothing because they've got a great butt. I'm sorry, these are things that are real, and Ayurveda has helped me to get real. What symptoms do I have? Are they hot, cold, wet, or dry? Am I getting too fixed? Vata, Pitta, Kapha is when you're fixed. It's a fixed imbalance. I don't want to be just Vata or Pitta or Kapha. I want all my organs to be doing their job. That's the job of those categories and the elements. And we really run seasonally, hot, cold, wet, dry. We are just like, oh, the weather report daily. Like, how much that weather report, human weather report, how much do we need that to be like, I'm hot, I better take on cool, and I better stay cool. So I'm going to lay low today, or wear some blue. And those things are our aura, or like the jewelry we put on, or the way we choose to get a haircut or buy our jackets or shoes. Very, very cool stuff. Just like, who are you? I love the new client who I'm just like, wow, look at who you are. And then, whoa, look at who you are. I just think people are fabulous. And Ayurveda allows me to have that freedom with my clients, and freedom to educate people on like, this is about individualism, and really anything goes. Come on, we're in such a lovely time. I just had this conversation with my partner, Scott, who, of course, fabulous human. But I just had this conversation with him the other night of just like, wow, it's like anything goes right now if you really want to find a pocket where that's available. And then how do we infiltrate the world but still stay traditionally sacred? Like, don't lose traditions, but how do we expand this, diversity that is so precious right now? And it was actually a conversation about like being in a group, and we were just like, look at how many different eras are in here, like and new, all newly made up, and just how cool that is, so yeah.
Man, crazy. So when we were in Portugal on that amazing clinical Ayurveda escape, that was the betterment of a month. It was absolutely mind-blowing. When we started class, you began with this Samkhya philosophy, which really blew my mind. Could you tell us a little bit about it and the history of it and kind of what that leads to?
Oh, what a beautiful philosophy. Yeah, let me take a sip of tea and collect myself. It's such a journey, isn't it? Everybody
It
want to go on
is.
a Samkhya journey? It is so nice. Okay. So, I've learned Samkhya in many different directions. Yogic from Swami Naranjananda, my teacher in the ashram in India. And I've read a lot of Sivananda and Yogananda. And then I've also gone into, really what does it look like in a northern perspective of India and then a southern perspective. And so first off, if you're down in the south, it would be Sankhya with an N. And then if you're up in the north, it would be with an M, Samkhya. So those are the same philosophies if you want to dive into this subject, and you could kind of look at different perspectives, because it's such this beautiful picture, which is called the wheel of creation. It's the value or the potential of dualism. So it's how do we take dualistic energies, and what are those is what we can get to. And then how does that manifest into things that are created? So one of the easiest ways I can give it is like, think about the fact that we have ether, empty space, and then that becomes matter. So like, because this is all scientific, it's very science and chemistry related early days. And I think it was probably a little simpler. So we got some good foundations there that we might have given up at this point. We should go back to those foundations they figured out when life was simple. And they looked at the simplicity of dualism and what we create. And so like, another way we could look at it, which is also Kadnaya's philosophy, is like positives make positives and negatives make negatives. And like, that's just the truth, because we need positive and negative for electricity and for energy to collide and become something. So they're looking at all these beautiful ways of looking at how ether becomes matter. And the first part of this is so cool. And it was like mind warping for me on a social level and like social norms and what I grew up with. And so you have your masculine Purusha, and you have your feminine energies, which is Prakriti. And it's got like a simple phrase, which is the avenue and the spark. So masculine energy is an avenue, and feminine energy is a spark. One cannot exist without the other. And without balance and use of one another energetically, you have to have a container for something to happen, And as you have a container for something to happen, and when those collide as energies, we manifest from that dualism, the wheel of creation. But the most fascinating thing that warped my brain is that masculine energy is seen as passive, no form, no color, just an avenue, just a container. It even goes into like the value of listening and just holding. And the feminine spark is active, it's will, it's color, it's form. Now you could think, whoa, I want that. And then we're all Shakti. But without this avenue, without trusting, without that listening and that witnessing and that container and being held, the spark is just, a big old fire, and it's not nourished. It can't grow into something of better value. So there's this like, there's two other parts to it that kind of take me to the next piece here, really, because you have to use your head and your heart. Like you have to use your head and your heart, and we have to speak to ourselves and to others in respect and collect our head and our heart to make decisions. And it'll take us to like every time we breathe, we have choice. This is all Samkhya. And this head and heart, Mahad, it's also called Buddhi. And it's the mind. It's Manos. And it's the mind. And the mind is like everything in your bloodline. Like, we're talking ancestors. And then you also could take it into like past lives, if that's something that is a belief of yours. It's okay for it just to be ancestral. That's a lot. But if you have that idea, then it's like, what did you learn from lifetimes before? What did your ancestors in your blood? You carry all that knowledge. And then the day-to-day things we learn and compute and figure out. And that's our wisdom mind, our wisdom truths, Mahad. And then we have Ahamkara. And Ahamkara is considered the ego. I am is what Ahamkara really comes down to. And it's the I am, but it's the heart's knowing. What do you really want? What do you desire? What do you need? And then there can be too much need, too much desire, and there can be too little, not trusting that you deserve, what anyone else can attain, with good hard work and good conscience, and this is heart. And we have to use that head and that heart wisdom together with the masculine feminine. So we have this innate dualism that collides the chakras, ignites our energy and our experiences and how we feel and what we want and who we want to, serve and support in the world. And then that has to, with every breath, there's the tall order, but really cool idea. Every breath, you get to choose. Like you get to use this dualism with this head and heart that you have and use energy around you and the energy inside you, and to make decisions. Now there's a whole lot of decisions that could be made from like cray monkey mind or patterns and habits and weaknesses. And I mean, those are real. Those are going nowhere. And if you really say this is karmic to me, you're saying I got to work on this for the rest of my life, and cross your fingers, whatever you did is going to hopefully attain better next time, or maybe you're out. But you don't get to decide, and we don't even know. We don't even really know. All we know is right now, and in this human form, and so Samkhya really allows you to have this masculine, feminine, and masculine's the right side of the body. It's considered in its currents, and left feminine is more of our, well, what I'm trying to really get to is like, we have made this masculine provide, and we have made feminine receive. And even when and I mean, this is something that gets said in the, kind of holistic realms all the time. It's like provider and receiver. And what I had to really warp my brain around is like, wait a minute, this isn't just masculine provides and feminine sits there and receives. This is masculine provides a container, an avenue within something can happen. And it's actually stillness. And it's not, it's just that, being held. And then there's that, spark of feminine that's about like, I'm going to utilize that container and see what I can create. And you could take this into human form, in just the ways of masculine and feminine, X and Y chromosomes are kind of how we, and two X's that might become a Y, but you know what I mean? Like that beginning, starts even with feminine, and then there's a decision on masculine or not, how much of that spark is going to be utilized or whatever, but they look at it that way. They're even like, we are even created for masculine and feminine on a matter form, physical, but it all comes from energy becoming matter. And it's just a really powerful tool. And I love this idea of being able to kind of look at masculine, feminine as dualism. Like, it's like, when am I the avenue and holding a container for somebody, and then when am I like, hey, I got an idea, I got a solution. So in my work, I feel like I'm just constantly like, I'm going to listen and pay attention and be a good health detective and assess as much as I can and just see you for who you are. I have no preconceived notions. I have no need for you to heal. That is your job. I'm just a mediator with some maybe good ideas, but let's just like pay attention for a minute. And then that, feminine spark gets to come in and be like, oh my gosh, I have some really good self-care tools, you know, and I'm not so sure these are the ones. These might be too time intensive. And you're telling me, you know, you've got 4 children, you know, that is already time sensitive. And, you know, and so what becomes the right medicine? And that's that spark. There has to be a nourished container of listening and just breathing and just letting it be nothing before we start saying, hey, what are we filling up in here? And what's going to be the right needs for you? And Ayurveda is so good at that, you know, and to be honest, I could take this conversation so beyond Ayurveda. I'm just going to always give respect to teachers that were like, please go teach this and please go, and consent is so important to me. So I will always hold that because that's my foundations and Tibetan Ayurveda. But as I am such a explorer of the world globally, this is the same. So no matter what medicine I go to or I'm choosing to study in the moment, you know, the roots of elemental medicine are there: hot, cold, wet, dry, you know, winter, spring, summer, fall, vata, pitta, kapha, wind, bile, phlegm, you know, damp, wind, metal, fire, you know, all of these things are elemental conversations from around the world. And that's what makes me really trust it. I'm like, whoa, we are just, hello, elementally designed, because look where we live. We are surrounded, so we are of it, and we are the matter of it. And that's, you know, and then how do we walk in Samkhya? Meaning, like, how do we use our masculine, feminine wisely, respect them as equals, and knowing which one is more true and maybe even like more of value, or which one might even be a little weaker. You could choose to strengthen it, or you could really always kind of sit in your values. And that's what makes us sometimes more masculine or more feminine. But the question I always have for people is, you know, just like, okay, but that masculine, feminine, also remember, we might be thinking that it's, you know, provider and action, and then we might be thinking that it's really, you know, like we might be thinking yang and yin, you know, and it's actually yin and yang, you know. And so then it's like, ooh, you know, and then I love that, because people will be like, oh, that means I've been more masculine. I'm like, but there's nothing wrong with masculine.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with feminine if you're in
so
right.
In one person, you have both
You
masculine
are both.
and feminine, and
oh my gosh,
and you end up, sometimes one can be more dominant than the other. Would you say that, you know, in the world today, that more men are acting out of their feminine? Is that because that is the spark, because that is the action, and more women are acting out of their masculine as witnesses in like
I think
we'll call it like a, maybe not in the family structure, but maybe in the institutional structures of the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it plays out different for different male-bodied or female-bodied. So I think it's such a broad, but I do think that there might be a setup that has happened in our social norm, you know, which I try not to live in, but I have to talk about it because we all got to get out of this. You know, we got to like knock that stuff out of our head, you know, and so I do think that we've got a setup of like masculine is active, provide everything, and, you know, work and suck it up. And it's not like that at all, actually, if you look at the foundations of the philosophies. And we've got this idea that, you know, okay, feminine, we, you know, it's about receiving and being vulnerable. And I'm like, both of them are vulnerable, because you got to work an edge. It's a practice. It's a practice to sit in container and just listen and hold. And it's a practice to know when to spark and when do you have a safe container to do it. Because you could just like light yourself on fire if you're just sparking from spark, or just like using up all your Shakti, you know, in that feminine, or using up too much of the masculine, thinking you got to go. or just sit and wait, receive. And that's where we have social norms that like I love that are getting, jostled. I actually really appreciate the jostling. I'm like, yay, I worked really hard. I'm one of the, going into, I don't feel old, but one of the going into a different time in my life, letting my gray grow out. It's a different time in my life. And I'm like, I have so put in my time. I feel so incredible about it. And now I get to see where everyone's taking it. And it's like, wow, thank you, younger generations, for passing on. The baton is passed on, and now I'll just keep kind of like, yes, let's crack this open. I teach a lot of kids, I teach a lot of teens, and I see teens, I love them, and I'm really connected to them. And I've got this thing right now where I'm kind of like, the interesting thing is we've always been and are they thems, like we are all they them. We are masculine and feminine. We are an avenue and a spark. And for me, that's a fun thing, because there's a lot of giving advocacy to people, taking ownership of who they are, and then there's a lot of like, what if you do, like I work a lot with the trans community too, and it's kind of like, I wouldn't say a lot, but I mean, it's been a part of my life. Shanti Project is like my life. Did haircuts there in San Francisco for years before I left to India. And I see the same thing there too, where it's like, okay, well, if we're going into the value of becoming male, and if that's like really the true value that you see, let's make sure we set up a beautiful parameters and some truths around what is that, because you might try to like push away what you thought was your feminine, but it's actually masculine. And so like a part of you don't want to give up because it's actually the truth. And so then you get to let yourself have the freedom of emotion and expression and still become male. You don't have to give all that up because it's something I see. I'm like, no, wait a minute. You get to keep all that. That's the greatest thing about it. And then same, for somebody who feels like, they have to become more, subordinate or, more, yin and kind of like pulled back in themselves because they're wanting to take on feminine, and become female and, and it's like, hey, you get to utilize that, and bring that, spark in and still have that, but still have your spark, and develop your spark. So I just love the conversation of how much intermingling Samkhya gives us. Like, honestly, there's just this beautiful intermingling, and it's like, which of this dualistic energy do you want to utilize? But the most important thing, I think, no matter how you body identify, no matter what that looks like, because it's like we have to know how to use masculine, feminine still. We don't want to give anything up, and we don't want to take anything that's a social norm on, that isn't going to be truly balanced for you, and so it's like we still have to, it's like, hey, whatever body is right for you, get in it, and like, where's the support, and then it's about also transitioning in very healthy ways, knowing how to get excess hormones out of the body as you're introducing new ones so that you have an easy transition. It's so powerful. I've seen so many beautiful, easier transitions. And I invite anybody who would like, to come to one of the community clinics and have that conversation about how to do that. But you could also just get my webinar on lymphatic system for $24 and learn all about your lymph, and just know that's where all your hormones get from one place to another, through that beautiful river. And I guess I want to say one more thing about Samkhya, if I may.
Yeah, please.
It's the breath part of it, which usually I speak of before now. But I think that, 4 directions, masculine and feminine and, head and heart. We have these 4 directions of elements that we dualistic make these decisions. Well, That all happens in our every breath. And we move our lymph river, which meets our bloodstream right at the heart. Our lymph river meets our bloodstream right at the heart. And we breathe those, rivers and streams up, and we have to be willing to look at how we feel, and like, come on, I don't just every single moment think about how I feel. Sometimes I'm like, I stopped breathing like 2 weeks ago. Let me go back to breath. And you got to let yourself off the hook. Like, it's a practice. I have not mastered it talking about it for 35 years. I'm still kind of like, I stopped breathing. Oh, I'm clenching my butt again because I hold my breath down in my root chakra, And I'm like, there I am doing it again. Okay, DeAnna, you have the right to take a deep breath and relax your butt. Funny how butt's coming up today. This is cute. And you got to look at your clenchings and where do you hold, and when we breathe from our root chakra down in our perineum, way down in our reproductive, loins, the pelvic floor. And we inhale and we expand into our sacrum, solar plexus at the diaphragm, and then the heart and the sternum and the shoulders, and then the throat and the jaw and the mandible and the ears and the eyes and the frontal bone. Everything expands out. And the hardest thing about your expanding out is that you have to meet the world, right? You got to open up. You got to open up. You're collecting oxygen. That's the value of why do you want to take a deep belly breath and expand yourself? You're collecting oxygen for your brain, for your cells. Like, that's why we breathe first thing. That's why we breathe last thing. We got to keep that oxygen levels going, but we have to meet the world and we have to see how we feel. And then you may notice that you're like quivering in your diaphragm and you're like, and then you're like, wait, that's my solar plexus. My solar plexus is having a hard time. Let me look at that. Let me just stay and witness. And sometimes you're like, I'm just like really busy in my day, but I just ran into a friend. I'm actually starting to like, oh my God, I gotta get a move on. Hi. And there's simple things like that where you're like, you ran into a friend, but it wasn't like in your flow. And then we start feeling these, that's not rude. It's just like, wow, and usually I'll just like take a moment and be with that space and put my hands down on my solar plexus or to my heart, and I just kind of like, it is so good to see you. I wish I could like really ground in with you, but I'm going to take a deep breath and just know that like, we've got so many things going on. Like, let's get together soon, and you get to kind of like breathe into the moment and speak truth and then get on with it. And then other times you might just, be with a friend and just everything is so timely and perfect. You're just like, I don't even care about that other thing I was going to do. I'm staying right here. Oh, you want to go to lunch too? Oh yeah, let's do this. And you let yourself stay in that flow. But any situation, giving you a tiny situation, because any situation could kind of throw you off and put you into a lockdown. You could walk away with it if you're not breathing into it. Really, everything starts with breath and knowing that every breath we take is an opportunity for you to make a decision about how you feel and what's in that inhale, like what's in you, how are you feeling, and then how much can you, see that it's just incredible. Like, what if you take a deep breath and you're just in the most amazing moment, you're loving this interview. And you're just like, I'm going to breathe into this. This is so cool. Let's hope that's, how people feel. And you're just like, I want to take this down into my like body. I don't want this just to be energy. I want this to become matter. I want it to matter to me. And I want to fill myself up with rightful matter and the right kind of juice, that's going to serve me and the whole. And so we take that deep breath and it comes to the top of the head. We go through every chakra. And that masculine, feminine, the two Kundalini snakes that we see in so many pictures, they cross over. So they don't even stay on one side. They interact. and they spin the chakra energy and they interact. And when you just feel like, oh my gosh, I am so on to something right now, that masculine, feminine, that energy is at the top of your head, and you exhale and you just let it feed the glandular body, the pineal, the pituitary, the vishuddha, throat chakra, the thymus, the pancreas, the adrenals, and our reproductive and our loins. And we just take that beautiful juice and energy and we let it feed positive conversations to our body, where all the hormones and the glands are like, oh, we're happy. We're satisfied. We took a deep breath and we have the oxygen to make energy from this and make something of this. And that's how our dreams become reality, is through this inhale, exhale, and keeping the wheel of positive. And like, you got obstacles no matter what you're going to go for. There's going to be stuff that comes along. It's just, what do you want to do with it? You know, and when it's really good stuff, you want to keep that wheel turning as much as you can. Oh my gosh, our privileged mind, it is so easy to go into the ands, ifs, and buts. But I still have a crappy car. It's like, man, you just made $3,000. Like, relax, you know, bask in it, you know, rub it all over your body, you know, take a moment, you know, and then sure, you can see what you want, what containers available, and how do you want to make more so you can get your car. Because you know that 3,000 is only going to some bills.
Always. Never goes to a new car.
You know, hey, nice. Come on. Hopefully some rightful clothes too. You know, some good sustainable clothes, because there's a couple hundred in there that you could probably part with, or go to not one or two restaurants. You get yourself some good clothes, you know, and that's part of it. You know, we have to bask in it a little, but be realistic and not use it all the energy up. And then when we breathe, the opportunity might be, oh my gosh, I am just like not feeling safe, or I am mad, or I've been betrayed, or I'm sad, or I'm overwhelmed with this world. I mean, these things are real. They happen all the time. We can't make them go away. Our history is our history. Our traumas happened. They're not going anywhere. It's about, what do you want to do with it? Like, what do you want to do with it? And don't feed it to your physical self. Don't identify. You know, I always say to people, I refuse to identify with the things other people did to me. I'm not identifying with that. I am not going to identify with the things somebody else affected me by. I am affected. I was affected. I am still affected. And that's mine to do with whatever I want, as like, how do I want to use it and switch it around? But I am not going to identify, you know, somebody else's, you know, weakness. I refuse, you know, and make that be who I am when it's something they did to me. So we got to know how to do that separation and be able to be like, I don't want to breathe this into my body. And so it might be in the moment, just like, I better take a deep breath before I say what, you know, I might say or whatever, but we inhale, we still have to collect it. We have to collect it. You have to take that deep, full breath. And then when it gets to the top of the head, we exhale it out. In some could be exhale it out the crown chakra. Sometimes that's a little too esoteric for people. So I started thinking, what else could I say that explains this top of the head? And then all of a sudden I was like, we have more orifices in the top of our head to blow out energy than anywhere else in the body. There's only a couple more. You know what I mean? And we need to be able to come clean. And there's a reason why we collect it up and then push it out of our senses. I sensed I don't feel good. I am choosing not to send that to my body. So I can blow it out my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my ears, my crown chakra. And I just like to trust and know, because it's not about, like, I've had students say, yeah, but then somebody else could catch it. If you blow it out, somebody else could catch it. And I'm like, it's personal. I am asking the universe, my higher powers, I am asking that this is dissipated into nothingness and goes no further than now. Because I am saying no, it goes no further. So this is not, you're dissipating out into nothingness, turning it just into pure empty space once again, and you got to worry about, what people are catching when you're, clinging on with guilt to something, or getting mad with somebody, or like when we're in an emotion and in a conflict, or feeling, at odds in a relationship, that's when we, have to go, whoa, let me think about what I'm saying. Let me really hear them. Let me really collect my thoughts. Let's have a thoughtful conversation. But like, truth has to be said, head and heart wisdom, truths. How honorable can we get in our truths? How honorable can we get in our truths? So I don't want to sit there in the conversation in the middle of the parking lot in the health food store and be so happy I ran into somebody getting out of their car. And yet I got like so much to go do, and I'm sure they do too. And so it's kind of like, how do we get the most out of that moment to feel like I'm connected to this person? I ran into them in the middle of my day. How cool. But we don't have to kind of like make a whole conversation or start going into full on process. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh. And then we're holding our breath, and it might be holding back your breath in your heart, or you might be blocking your solar plexus, and I think it's really good for us to give each other the truths and the respect to be like, oh, so good to run into you. So good to run into you. I'm sure you got as many things to do today as I do. This means we should probably, figure out, where we go next with our connection. And so good to see you.
So much of it is about, like honoring ourselves and our feelings and the boundaries, and not taking on someone else's agenda, and, just being so at balance with yourself. I'm wondering a lot of Ayurveda is about balance. It's about restoring, the hot, cold, wet, dry.
Balance.
Everything's about balance. I have a question for you, because this is where I wonder exactly how Ayurveda kind of travels into the sustainability and fashion area, because what's happening there is all about imbalance too. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, I am just so excited about it. It's like the same joy of seeing diversity come, into the truth of everyday life. It's the same thing for me, because I have been in that fashion industry, and I love fashion. I mean, my clothes and my jewelry and my shoes, they're extremely important. And so I'm just very excited. And I think it's putting, for me, what I think is happening, or what I have seen happen in my years, is like, it's also a community that likes to, there is an innate understanding in the beauty and fashion industry that that holistic is important, and then there's the, like, we have to present. And so those, sometimes those boundaries get crossed, or whatever, you know what I mean? And this happens anywhere, any industry, everywhere. But what I kind of have noticed is there's a holistic revolution going on, and it's making massive impacts. And as soon as we started having like spas talking holistic, or like, that's one of the reasons why the DeAnna Center was so important for so long. And I feel like now that ball is totally rolling, which gave me the ability to kind of go into things that were also important to me. It was I know the ball's rolling, not only for me teaching and seeing my students open treatment centers, but we are in a therapeutic revolution. And I hope I have done my part, with all my clinical aromatherapy and teaching in spas and being a plant educator for Ayurveda in my early years. And we're seeing that hitting the fashion industry, as well as our product and our beauty industry, cosmetics, everything. How cool it was in those early days to kind of start being like, no cruelty to animals. Now it's kind of, everyone's kind of like, it better say that, that better be true. That's what I want, and it's kind of become more of the And now it's getting into fashion. It's like now we're starting to think about fabrics and chemicals that, that play out with dyes.
I
And
wonder,
and
I
I think
wonder if
it's
sorry to interrupt.
beautiful. Yeah. And I mean, it's beautiful. And it really is that we all now are starting to go, everything is so imbalanced. I kind of need to look at everything in my life and make sure there's better balance. And there's more of a revolution of that happening, even when I go to New Jersey to visit my sister, and look around at centers and wellness and just like how much has it changed in India? It even has changed India in such a beautiful way. I was 30 years ago. I'm on my anniversary when I return in July. It'll be 30 years since I've been traveling to India. And I was 23 when I left. I was with Dr. Lobsong, and he said, you need to get permission from the motherland. Go to India and learn. And I was like, I want permission from the motherland. I am going. And it was a whole nother world back then. And it was harder to find, Ayurveda. Now there's like Ayurvedic spas and Panchakarma centers and retreat centers everywhere. And I like it because it's like there's this reinvention of old things. And that's a huge fabric industry. So I've been watching all the dyes and the clothes coming out of India and having that feeling through the years, just being like, ooh, I love those pants. I want those. And then it's like, yeah, but where were these made and what are they made? Wait a minute, but you could always still find, and they've held true to like hand stamped cotton, linens, satins, silk, you know what I mean? Like, and just having those like really, the silks and the dyes, the natural dyes. Oh my gosh, they're so good at that. Yeah. But there's still the issue of alum as a mordant. So we still have this issue, which is of aluminum, and we need to be very careful about those things. And I think we're starting to realize what can permeate our skin. We're starting to realize that chemicals affect us. And then we start thinking about what's on our skin, and what am I really putting there? So I just think we're in kind of this very beautiful holistic revolution. And my word holistic is with a W because it's about wholeness. Holistic. Seriously, it's wholeness, and we have to think about all the things that are going to make us, fill in our gaps, our weakness gaps. And that's why I have to can I use my breath to think about how to express myself better? Can I use my breath to make really good choices? Like, oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. And then I have to be all, it's polyester. How important is this? Like, oh, there's a whole conversation I have with myself that's like, and that takes us back to where are we looking for our satisfaction and what is greed really, and envy and being seen, and how important is it? And so I always try to think of well, there is so much polyester in the world already. Like, my freedom comes to the thrift store. I'm like, I'm going to reclaim and recycle, and that's the stuff I'm going to let myself do. But I work very hard to be part of being holistic is for me to consider, if I'm buying something that was newly made, knowing a little bit more about it.
Do you have any brands that you love or would recommend?
Oh my gosh. No, I'm not good with names like authors. And let me think about I'm like, I'll go grab a couple things. No, there is a couple. I mean, of course, hello, holding court. I mean, how would you not go get those beautiful clothes? I mean, they're gorgeous, and the energy. I mean, you can even feel it going to your website. I mean, it's just like the energy is right there, I do really like the Booty company for my panties and little bralettes and like a simple cotton, long sleeve, or like little, I have one on right now, my strappy little tank,
Oh,
I
nice.
love that they, I like the way they market and present the body, and multiple bodies, and I like things that have that like basics, it's very simplistic and basics, really enjoy that. I wish I could right now remember some of the other companies, but
No, you can always
those would be the
email me some after if you
That's
think of
true.
anything.
I'll go look at my labels.
Open
I
up the
really like
closet,
buying
take a look.
linen. I really like buying
Ooh.
linen off of Etsy. Just saying, like I notice that's where I find the best linens, and people who are doing very specific things, and like sewing in their house, or in their warehouse if that's where they're at in their business. And I just love that independence and somebody being able to say, like I like that when somebody comes back and says, hey, you ordered an extra large, do you mind if I get your measurements, because I'll be making this skirt? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
really? Oh my gosh. Like that just makes me really happy. That kind of new industry that didn't used to be so available. That makes me very happy too, because I'm of a size and a shape that is not as simple, and I think that everyone might even say that about their body. Actually, isn't that funny? I bet you everyone has a feeling that there's certain things about themselves where the clothes aren't so easy, So it's really nice we have some of that available.
Mm.
Yeah.
And where can we connect with you online?
Well, I am DeAnna Essentials, DHYANA. I am all about the essentials and what it is to have our ideas of eating healthy and drinking healthy liquids and breath, and the lymphatic system, our immunity, just the basics of, and I have essential products. I mean, that's really what I focus on at this point, is just like, what are the essentials? Like, you need Atlantic gray salt. Get the water ebook and it'll explain it all for $5.99. Change your life. Seriously. You know what I mean? And just, what is it to touch ourselves and know what the lymph is and have like empowerment around the body? So I have an entire product of, store products. And I have all kinds of online classes. I have in-person classes. I'm in the middle of one right now, which is my most advanced class that I teach, which is called Advanced Pulse. It's for all my graduates, and it's for all my graduates to like go into the depths of pulse reading. And so I'm in great company right now with all students who have deep dived into the clinical course with me, and that means we all know each other, at least I know each one of them really well, so I have a lot of safety to just go into that advanced space. But people grow with me. That's how we end up in advancement. Some people, it starts with like, I saw you on that lymph webinar and like I got obsessed. And I'm like, yay! Another person who's touching themselves and taking their electrolytes and loving spices and spicing of your life. Like, we should be pleasure driven and want to have fun with our concept of medicine. We don't even need to call it that anymore. You know what I mean? It's like playful therapeutics. They're pleasurable.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about Samkhya and about breath work. And really, your story is so inspiring. And I could have you, like, you could honestly talk for 3 hours. And I know that you can talk for 6 hours if I let you.
Oh boy, busted.
I'll have to have you back on so I can ask you more questions and get more into some of your philosophies. And it's always such a pleasure to receive information from you, wisdom.
Thank you so much. I really, every day, I never take it for granted, that I have a lot to say, and I've collected a lot of wisdom and a clinical experience, and the idea that people want it and are healing from it and happier people for it, and then given the freedom to just ripple effect, like, hey, none of this belongs to me. This medicine, it does not belong. It's the elements, it doesn't belong to any of us, and it belongs to every single one of us, because we're all surrounded and we're all experiencing it in our own way together. So, may you also, whoever's listening to this, be inspired to pass this on to someone else, or, head them my way and get them inspired. Ayurveda has made me a better person.
I will be sending everyone your way.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. And somebody wants a custom blend or wants a tongue assessment from me. That's a really good way for $59, I think it is, or something. That is a great way to have some interaction. You send a whole questionnaire that I made up, and then I intuit and I look at the symptom list, and I make up custom formulations that get sent to you. And then I also do tongue assessments. It's really quite fun, but it's like cheap medicine. It's a good way to get to know yourself. There's a lot going on in that tongue, so I go through the color, the coating, the cracks, and the shape. And then I do my whole intuitive and my kind of intellect, because I'm a 50-50 kind of practitioner. But it's a good way to, and I give lots of advice. You don't want anyone telling you what's going on with yourself without advice behind it. So solutions and advice and remedies being provided, very important. So there's a lot of resources on that website too that are free for you. So yeah, thank you so much, Courtney.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. And I will be sending everyone to your website and then some.
Oh, thank you.
Have a wonderful day, and I will be I'll be in contact.
Sounds great. Adios.
Bye.
A huge thank you to DeAnna Batdorff for sharing her open-hearted wisdom. I've actually had the privilege of being her student, and I highly recommend enrolling in any course that she has to offer if you're interested in being more in touch with your body and with your spirit. To find out more about her, you can go to her website. That's DeAnnaEssentials.com. DeAnnaEssentials.com, and the same name for the Instagram page. Thank you so much, and that's a wrap.
Hey, this is Zika from Austin. DS Now is a Holding Court production, and it's written and directed by Courtney Barringer. Parker Ainsworth made the music for it, and a special thank you to Alexandra Schock.